And the way the Torah describes that last trip, where he came from Refidim to Har Sinai to receive the Torah, it refers to the Jewish people. Oh, I forgot to hit it. Okay, sorry. You hear it? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the last journey from Matan Torah, when it says, and they moved from Refidim to Har Sinai, it refers to the Jewish people in single form, not Vayachanu like normally it says they rested, they encamped, but it says Vayichan, he encamped, as if it was one person. And our sage of the Chachomim actually explained that this experience, this principle at that moment, that Yidden felt like one person, was a very important preparation for Matan Torah. And I want to discuss this whole concept. Number one, how is it possible that a whole nation of 600,000 males above 20, and then all the younger males and all the women, it was a congregation of some 2 million people, should feel like one person? What type of unity is that? What does it mean they were like one person? And why is that a prerequisite for Matan Torah, for receiving the Torah? We know that we discussed in the past that the Jewish people as a nation, as a people, were created by direct godly intervention. What it means is that they did not grow out as a people naturally. Then from one person they multiplied and then multiplied further and became a nation. That's not how they were created as a nation. Because when they were in Mitzrayim, they were mixed with the Egyptians, and they all but lost their national identity. And then God came and He identified them, and He identified all the Jews from amongst the Egyptians, amongst the Mitzrayim. And He took them out as a nation. He declared them as a nation at that moment. In this declaration, He said, how am I going to identify a Jew from a non-Jew? I'm going to give them one mitzvah. While they were still in Mitzrayim, they were given this one mitzvah, one commandment of Korban Pesach. And when I see a Yid doing this Korban Pesach, that will tell me that this is a Jewish home. In other words, the definition of a Jewish home at that time, at that moment, was changed from what we always think that the Jewish home means, somebody who has the ancestry from Avraham, Yitzchak, Yankov. Because, as I said, they all but lost their sense of who they are. And a Jew was identified by one whom God had chosen and given him a mitzvah. This, in fact, we discussed it before, this, in fact, is the meaning of Judaism. That a Jew and Judaism, which means the Torah, are inseparable. The reason they're inseparable is because the Torah defines them as a nation. If not for the Torah, their nationhood is totally insignificant. It doesn't exist. And throughout the years and throughout the generations, most of the time, since the creation, Jews lived dispersed all over the world. And they were one nation. And if you talk to them, you look at them, there's hardly any similarity between a Jew coming out of Russia and a Jew coming out of Morocco or Poland or Czechoslovakia. They're all very, very different.
Brazil.
Even Brazil, yeah, sorry. Well, Brazil is a more recent establishment. Brazil is either Polish, Russian, Hungarian, but when you talk about people who lived for thousands of years in one place, they're totally unrecognizable. And yet they're one nation, because their nationhood is defined not by their ancestry, but by their Torah. This is what defines them as a nation.
By the way, Brazil has the first synagogue in America.
Okay? You're very, very impressed. So coming back to this principle that Yidden, in order to receive the Torah, had to, at that moment, actually recognize the entire nation as one single person. And I asked, it's obvious, how can it be? A nation that is born in a natural process. The minute one man has two sons, these two sons have their individual interests. And historically, unfortunately, the worst type of intrigue and infighting took place between brothers, Rahman al-Islam, and close relatives, because they have their rivalry, there's rivals and there's competition, and they break up. Not has shown that this is how it should be, or that there's a rule, but it very often happens. So when you have children born even from one parent, let's say Avram had two sons, Yitzchak and Yishmael. Were they in any way related? Anyway, one nation? They were broken up into two nations at birth. Yitzchak had two sons, had Yankov and Esau. Were they one nation? They were two different nations at birth. It's an interesting thing too, that Rashi points out that when Esau, it says in the Torah, Esau took his family and he moved away from Eretz Canaan to Har Seir, to the place where he settled in. So it says over there that he took Nafshois Beisei, the souls of his household, which means the people of his household. And there the word Nafshois is used in plural. Many souls. And Rashi points out how many souls were that at that time? 6. He had 6 offspring when Esau moved away from Yitzchak and went to Hasei. 6. And they're called Nafshois Beisei. When Yankov came to Mitzrayim, there were 70 souls. And the Torah refers to them as nefesh, the soul, not the souls. The soul, the nefesh. Because that which relates the nefesh, the people of Yaakov's household, and that which relates the people of Esav's household are two entirely different principles. Esav's household is related by ancestry. They're all children of Esav. So they have Esav's characteristics, but they have all individual interests. Each one is interested in building up his own abode, his own powerhouse, his own enclave, his own base. That which unites Yaakov's children is not their ancestry. That which unites Yaakov's children is their faith and their principle. So there could be 70, and they're all one. Nefesh. And if in fact there are many, that itself says that they have different principles. And they're not one, and there is no way that they can unite to receive one Torah. So this is the principle that is manifest so clearly that when the Torah says that Eden came to Har Sinai to receive the Torah, they were like one person. Rashi over there explains this reference that is referred to as one person. And Rashi points out that in every other Chaniyah, in every other encampment, because it says many times Eden journeyed from one place and they encamped here, journeyed from another place and encamped here. In every other encampment, they were not like one. There were all kinds of intrigues, all kinds of arguments amongst Eden. You know, Eden know how to argue. Right? You don't accept things tacitly. But when they came to Har Sinai, they were like one. What is this stance? So there's a sikha from the Rebbe. The Rebbe explains. At that point, when they first came to Har Sinai, there was no revelation, no godly revelation as of yet, because this was several days before Matan Torah. Matan Torah was on the 6th day of Sivan. And they came to Har Sinai on Rosh Chodesh Sivan. So they were still way before Matan Torah. But coming to this mountain, knowing that this is the place where they are going to receive the Torah, the aura, the inspiration that took them, just knowing this principle that they're going to receive the Torah, that alone was enough to eliminate any kind of divisions amongst them. And they came there like one person. What is behind it? How does this have that effect? It says that when Yankov gave his sons the brachas, you know, that Yankov, in the last days of his life in this world, gathered all his 12 sons, and he gave each one a bracha. At that time, the Gemara says that actually Yankov wanted to reveal secrets of the future to his sons. He wanted to reveal secrets, and one of the secrets was that he wanted to reveal to them when is the end of time, what is going to be, when is going to Mashiach come. And he lost the permission. He was not given permission to reveal it. So when Yankov saw that he was not permitted to reveal this to his sons, who were all tzaddikim and great men, he was taken aback, and he started thinking that perhaps my sons, the 12 Shvatim, they're not all the same. They have different ideas. They have different ideas. They don't all subscribe to the same principles that I have taught them. And this is why I'm not permitted to reveal to them the ultimate secret of the world. So he asked his sons, is there anyone amongst you who has different thoughts of the principles that I have taught you? And at that time, they all answered together, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. This is the original Shema Yisrael, which refers to Yisrael because Yankov was called Yisrael. Listen, Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, our God and your God is one, is only one. And Yankov at that time answered, Baruch Shem K'machus Eloheinu, thank God. Amongst the Shvatim, the 12 Shvatim, yes, they all believed in one God, and they all were together, but there were definitely differences amongst them. Even to the extent that we know what happened with Yosef. When there was the dreams and all kinds of different things, they didn't tolerate it that easily. And all kinds of things resulted from that. In simple sense. So how can they be like one person? And the explanation to this is that this nation, Yankov's sons, nationhood to them, again, does not mean the ancestry, but it means their faith and their principle. And in that, they are like one person. In that, their faith and their insight in their relationship to Hashem is so pure that there cannot be any difference between one and another. This is why, when they came to Har Sinai, and at Har Sinai was not a question of how do you interpret this verse and how do you interpret this verse. When it came to interpretation, when it came to learning, there were always different opinions. You open up the Gemara, and you'll see that on every line, every question, there are a minimum of 2 opinions. And then sometimes there are more than 2 opinions. But when it came to receiving the Torah, that they are all accepting the Torah and submitting themselves to Hashem, in that respect there was not any difference. There was no cognizable difference between one and the other. They were like one person. And this is not because they said, well, this is our national inheritance. But this is because this unity, this Torah, their relationship to God, this is what created their nation. The first of the Aseret HaDibros, the 10 Commandments, the first of the 10 Commandments is Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzeisecha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am your God who took you out of the land of Mitzrayim. So when we read this simply, it seems to be saying that I am your God who did all the miracles in your coming out of Mitzrayim, and therefore you listen to me because you know what kind of miracles I'm capable of doing. But that's not really what it means. Because if you were talking, if the aim of it there was to impress upon the Yidden what Hashem can do, then he should have said, Anoich Hashem Elokecha, Asher Barosi Shemayim Va'oretz. I'm your God who created the heavens and the earth. That's a greater manifestation of his power than in Tzeitzich and Eretz Mitzrayim. That's a greater miracle. Why does it say Asher Tzeitzich and Eretz Mitzrayim? The answer is that the point of saying Asher Tzeitzich and Eretz Mitzrayim is not merely to say what I'm capable of doing. The point of Asher Tzeitzich and Eretz Mitzrayim is that you as a nation are not a nation amongst nations, a people of the world. You are a nation created directly by me as a nation. All other people, there was a person, and this person had children, and these children had other children. That's how a nation formed. It formed, so to speak, naturally. Your nation, this nation, I made it into a nation because I took you out of Mitzrayim. Therefore, you are my nation. That's the point. You are my nation. I took you out of Mitzrayim to create me a place in the world. You as a nation represent my presence in the world. That's what it means. That's what the Jewish people are. And this is why that when they came to Matan Torah, they were like one person, because in that respect, that every Yid recognizes that his place in the world is not what he is and some kind of worldly accomplishment. His place in the world is that he represents the godly presence in the world. He is part of the godly nation that is exactly the same by every Yid. No difference. That's why at that point they were like one person. There's a passage that says, "V'yohavto l'reyacho kamecha." You should love your chaver, your friend, like yourself. So Meforshim, the commentators, ask, how is this possible? A person is closer to himself than to the next person, no matter what kind of person he is. A person always loves himself more than somebody else. How is it possible to give such a precept, such a command? You should love your like yourself, exactly. So there are many different explanations, interpretations presented. That's called in the Nigla Torah. But Hasidus comes and says there is a deeper principle in there. And this deeper principle says that in fact a Yid really regards the other Yid exactly like himself, and it's not out of that. It's not out of reality. Exactly like himself. When is that? The Alter Rebbe explains. When a Yid recognizes what he truly stands for, what it truly means to be a Yid. What does it mean to him when you say, I am Jewish? When he reflects on these words, I am a Jew, then he actually can include his friend exactly in the same level. They're mamish like one person. I mentioned to you in the past what the Rambam says in explaining the halacha, the din, the halacha, the law, that says that when a person is obligated to do a certain thing, like bringing a korban, in certain instances when a person is obligated to do something, and he refuses to do it. But this happens to be, if a person Reuven owes Shimon money, and he refuses to pay, so then the Bezdin goes in, so to speak, by court order, goes into his property, confiscates his property, and gives it over to Shimon. No problem. He owes him the money. He doesn't want to pay, so the court gets involved and pays for it. That's possible only in civil disputes. But there are certain things that it cannot be done, it cannot have an effect unless it's done willingly. Such as if he is obligated to bring a korban. If a man is obligated to bring a korban, various, if he committed himself and he made a promise he was going to bring a korban, and he refuses to bring a korban, and the korban has to be lirtzoynei, has to be willingly. So a person cannot go into his property, confiscate and buy a korban, make a korban for him because it's an invalid korban. A valid korban is only if he brings it willingly. This and other instances of such quality, what do person do? We have to make him bring the korban, but we can't make it unless he says unless he consents. So what do we do? There is a very interesting halacha in this. We bring him to Bezdin, and we force him. First we try to convince him, then we threaten him, and then even if needed be, we hit him. And when he gets hit, what happens? He doesn't want to get hit anymore. So he says, oh, okay, I'm willing. I'm willing. So in the minute he says, I'm willing, we take the korban, we mark the korban, and it's a kosher korban. So the Rambam asks, what kind of willingness is this? He was screaming, I don't want. He only consented because he didn't want to get hit. What kind of willingness is this? What kind of consent is this? So the Rambam explains, as I mentioned it many, many times, Rambam explains that this which he says I don't want is not his real desire. This is a desire that he succumbed, he fell in to his Yetzer Hara. But this is not his real desire. His real desire is that he actually does want to do the korban. He does want to do what Hashem wants him to do. That's the inherent desire of every Yid. When he says, I don't want, it's because he is at that moment a prisoner to his own Yetzer. And therefore when he gets hit and he kind of frees himself from that imprisonment, then he really wants. But that's not all the Rambam says. Rambam says that a Yid inherently, that's the way the Rambam explains it, not just he wants to do what Hashem tells him to do. A Yid wants to be a Yid. He wants to be one of the Jewish people. That's inherent. He will never consent to break away that he is not Jewish. He's not one of the Jewish people. He wants to be a Yid. This is an inherent principle, an inherent desire in every Jewish soul. And he wants to be a Yid. And therefore, when he says, I don't want to make a korban, which means I don't want to do what a Yid is supposed to do, That's a false, that's a lie. That's a lie. So therefore, when he consents, that's saying the truth. Because he really wants to be a Yid. If he got fooled, the Yehoshua got in the way, and he says no, but he doesn't mean it. Because to break away from the Jewish people is not a choice that a Yid has. What is this stance? What is the connection? You say, I can be a Yid and not do the mitzvahs. But obviously, it's one and the same thing. And the Rambam says, if he wants to be a Yid, means that he wants to do all the mitzvahs. How is this synonymous? How is this the same thing? He wants to be a Yid, therefore he wants to do all the mitzvahs. Maybe he wants to be a Yid and not do the mitzvahs. What's inherent in this statement? He wants to be a Yid. Obviously, what this says is that being a Yid, by definition, means to do the mitzvahs. A Yid is not an ancestral yichus. The meaning of being a Yid is that he has Torah mitzvahs. This principle that a Yid means having Torah mitzvahs, every Yid recognizes it. But a Yid means that because a Yid, the Jewish people as such, were created on that principle, on that basis, that they have Torah mitzvahs. And therefore it's a synonymous thing. If he says he wants to be a Yid, means that he wants to do Torah mitzvahs. They're inseparable things. Because being Jewish as such, without Torah mitzvahs, means that the whole Jewish concept is only in terms, only an ancestral. That's not a reality. That's not the real definition of being Yid. Why does a Yid want to be a Yid? The Rambam says, he wants to be a Yid. What does it mean that he inherently wants to be a Yid? Which automatically brings upon him all the responsibilities of Jewishness. The meaning of a Yid wanting to be a Yid is at Matan Torah, at Yetzias Mitzrayim, and then followed up at Matan Torah. The Jewish people acquired a unique definition of what they are. That they stand, and we said before, they represent in this world, they represent the godly presence. They carry this banner. They have a function that's unique to them, that has no similarity anyplace else in the world. This means that this is the Jewish people as a whole, and every individual Yid who is a member of that people while he is an individual, he is what he is to himself. This one is a Heshen, this one is a Yankel, this one is a Baruch. Everybody has his own name. Everybody comes from a different country, from Brazil, and from Poland, and from Russia, and from Czechoslovakia, from Uruguay, whatnot. They're all individual, all different. That's their individuality, individual differences. But with all their individuality, as an individual, they all represent one principle. In other words, individuality by Yidden is different concept, the concept of individuality, the concept of differences. By Yidden is a totally different concept than it is in the rest of the world. In the rest of the world, individuality means I live in my own little world. Nothing to do with anybody else. I'm a world unto myself. Everybody else is outside of this perimeter. No commonality at all. The fact that we look alike, we are the same race, means nothing. It means nothing. This is to the extent, just to bring in a little bit of a laugh, this is to the extent that it can be accepted to the human mind that human beings actually have an ancestry from monkeys. There's no real principle that unites them. Do you understand what evolutionary principle is, how that affects a person's mind? The evolutionary principle is that this which I am is because what I made of myself. That's what the evolutionary principle process is. That we started off as a monkey, and then this monkey decided that I can do a certain trick, and that will give me advantage over the other monkey, and therefore I learned that trick. So there, I made it on my own, and eventually I got wisdom, and therefore I outsmarted the other monkeys, and therefore I became a human being. So essentially, it's what I made for myself. And therefore, what shaykhs, what connection do I have with the other one? On the contrary, what I am, that's my own definition of who I am. It's not a definition I get from any place. And this, what should I call it? This stupidity is accepted to human minds. How can it be accepted? Not because it makes sense, but because from the principle of individuality, okay, this is what I am, I have nothing to do with anybody else. By Yidden also we talk about individuality. There is individual, every person has his individual obligation. As a matter of fact, in today's Parsha, in today's Seder, Chumash HaPekudim, the Chumash of counting. What does counting mean? That every Yid had to be counted as a separate entity. We didn't say, oh, this is this Shaver, this is the Jewish people. Meld them all together, make it all one big kasha. No. We took every individual, we counted him, and we said, what family do you belong to? And what Shaver do you belong to? And what degel, what flag, what group? I'm sure you know what today or tomorrow you'll learn about the Golim. That 3 Shvotim were made into a group. What degel do you belong to? Where are you stationed relative to the other Shvotim? Where are you stationed around the Mishkan? When Eden came into Eretz Yisrael, each Shevet was granted his own land. There was no mix. And you know to what extent there was no mix? To the extent that when there was a possibility there would be a mix, that from one Shevet property will transfer to another Shevet, that Hashem, there is a deen that we should make sure that it doesn't happen. Because if a girl was inheriting, under certain circumstances, a girl inherits the property. If she inherits the property and then she gets married to a member of the other shevet, so her property goes with her to the other shevet. So the Bnei Yosef complained about it. If you learn later on, and then there was a mitzvah that at least for that generation, that the girls should all marry within their own shevet. Not later on, but during that generation that entered that soul, they should marry within their shevet so that there will be no transfer of property between shvot. Every shevet should have a clear demarcation line where he belongs. So there is definitely recognition of individuality by Yid. There is shevet Yehuda, there is shevet Reuven, there is shevet Yosef, there is shevet Levi, there is the Kohen. Everyone has his own function. And his function is no less than the other ones, except that each one has his particular function. But there's one important thing. The individuality is all there. But in their individuality, each one represents the entire Jewish people. Every Yid represents the entire Jewish people. Because even though he's an individual, but he's not an individual separate, coming from Mars, or coming from from an evolutionary process. He was made by the Meibashter to be part of the Jewish people. And as such, he represents the entire Jewish people. Lately, we've used the following illustration for other purposes, and we don't see this. But it's very apropos to demonstrate this moshel now. When you look at two leaves from the same tree, no two leaves look alike. Amongst all the billions of leaves that there are, no two leaves ever looked exactly alike. That's a principle we know, and it's one of the great miracles that the world shows that this is a godly creation. It's not a natural creation. But every leaf, even though it's different than the next one, every leaf claims rightfully that I am the leaf of this tree. I'm missing nothing. I represent this tree 100%. Can it be said that since this tree produced 1,000 leaves, therefore each leaf represents 1,000th of what this tree stands for, or what kind of tree this is? No. Each leaf represents 100% this tree. Not 99%, 100%. It's completely representative of this tree, even though it's different than so many others. Every Yid is a representation of the entire Jewish people. Because every Yid represents the principle completely of the entire Jewish people. He is not an individual unto himself. He's individual in terms of what this leaf looks like, what his function is, how he speaks about God, how he speaks about Torah, how he thinks and how he does things. But the principle of what he is exactly the same. Not only the same, in English there are two words, they're similar and the same. Anybody know the difference? Similar means that there are two books. There are two books, and they may be of the same content, but there are two books that are similar. So it makes no difference which one you take. You take this one, you take this one, you'll be able to learn the same thing. But they're not the same book. It's two books. The same means the very same. It's one, because every deed is the same as the other, because they're all connected to the same God. They're actually representing the same nation. Not similar, but the same. This is the meaning, and this is what behind the mitzvah, v'ahavta l'recha k'amecha. Even though that we are different and we have our individual ways, and sometimes we can even resent the other one. I don't like the way he talks, the way he walks, I don't like the way he eats, I don't like the way he screams, I don't like many things. These are peripheral, not peripheral, external things. But this does not speak about him. Because he represents 100% the same thing that I represent. The same, not the similar. The very same thing. And this is how it was possible for even to receive such a Torah directly from Hashem. Because at that moment, they completely recognized that with all their individuality and all their differences, that this is from this Shevet and that Shevet, and this one is so smart and this one is not so smart, all of these differences that they recognized were completely null and void and of total insignificance, because now they come down to the soul of their existence, to the neshama. The Torah is the soul and the neshama of their existence. And when it comes to the soul and to the neshama, it's one and the same neshama. So this explains the union that we say that the Matan Torah even became like one, because at that time they felt the soul of their existence. And this explains also the mitzvah that we have, even though he's only Reyacho, he's only your friend, he's a neighbor, he's not you, he really is you, because that is the very same soul that he lives from, that you live. And this is incumbent, in other words, it's required that we should reflect on this. We should reflect on it in order to recognize, to appreciate, and to experience the true meaning of being a Yid. One may think being a Yid means, oh, I learn Torah, I do mitzvahs, I know certain things, I learn in certain way. These are all very true things. But the first and foremost inyan that I'm a Yid is that I, as an individual, as a separate entity, I represent exactly the same thing that every other in the world represents. Nothing different. And we together represent Hashem's presence in this world. This is, as a matter of fact, why Eden, throughout the ages, had such, the trials and tribulations that the Jewish people went through. It's not the time to pour, so to speak, to make us bitter, but the Jewish people had a very, very difficult existence until we came to this moment. How was it possible for the people to survive? How is it possible for the people to bear, to carry through that type of a burden that Eden carried? And after all that burden, survive. Come up again. Come up again and rebuild. How is it possible? You would think that the individual was destroyed. Like I mentioned the other day, when you talk about the survivors of the concentration camps, survivors of the concentration camps, where their individuality as human beings was destroyed to nothing. They had, in America there's an expression, they had rights. They had no rights whatsoever. They had no existence whatsoever. They had no consideration whatsoever. They were like cockroaches. It meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing. You didn't have to have a second thought if a Nazi officer wanted to shoot a Yidden. You didn't have to have a second thought. Should I shoot or not? I feel like it. It meant nothing whatsoever. Didn't have to give an accounting, nothing. And the Eden survived those who came out alive. You would think that they were spiritually and emotionally and intellectually dead. Not so. Surely they were damaged, no question about it. But they were not dead. They came out of the concentration camp, and not only came out while they were still in the camp, when they were just freed from the Nazi burden. The Americans came in, the Russians came in. When the pressure, when they were freed, allowed to breathe, and given some rations to eat, they immediately began to think, how do we rebuild our lives? How do these people come to think about rebuilding our lives? Who are you? You exist? You still think you exist? How do you need to think about rebuilding your life? What's the answer? What was it that allowed them to think about rebuilding their lives? It is that they did not, a Yid never identified himself as himself. He identified himself as a Yid. And being a Yid cannot be destroyed. The Jewish people cannot be destroyed. And he represented the Jewish people. Yes, I myself am limping and I'm hurt and my whole body is damaged, but I'm a Yid. This cannot be damaged. And he was able to pick himself up and start rebuilding the Jewish people. Because that cannot be destroyed, cannot be taken away. That's an indestructible quality. This is how a Yidden were able to rebuild the Jewish world after the Second World War into what we have today, which is really unprecedented. You know what unprecedented means? Never in Jewish history, world history, was Judaism or Jewish life so rampant and so developing with such power, with such breadth and depth as it is today. Never. Never. I'm not talking about Eretz Israel. I'm talking about the diaspora. I'm talking about America. I'm talking about England. I'm talking about France. I'm talking about going back to Russia now, going back to Czechoslovakia, going to the communist countries. Wherever you go. When our boys, the shluchim, our boys go for Pesach to Russia, they want to make a seder. You know how many responses they get? In the hundreds. To make a seder for 500 people. 2 boys make a seder for 100 people. It's nothing unusual. Nothing unusual. All over the place. And it's unprecedented in Jewish history, after they were destroyed the way it is, because we have an indestructible quality in us. Every individual is indestructible. He is destructible, Rahman San, individually, but not in that part where he is one thing and the same with everybody else, where he is a Jew, a Yid. This is how we have to look and relate to each other. This is what prepares us for Matan Torah. And this is what gives us the opportunity and the strength to learn the Torah, fulfill its mitzvahs, and grow indefinitely, unlimited. Because we don't look back, we look only forward. Why do we look only forward? Because we as individuals represent the infinite quality of being Jew. Take 2 more minutes and I'll tell you this. This is not probably not a new story to you, but it will illustrate the point which we are discussing. There's a story told that the Rebbe Maharash, when he was a young boy, he was a very lively child, and what to call a daring child. You know, he was fearless, and of course he was good-natured and all that, but he was a real, one of the guys. So one time, the boys gathered together in the courtyard, and there was a tall ladder. I don't remember if it was a ladder or it was just a straight pole up. I think it was a tall ladder, very tall ladder. And it was scary to climb up the ladder. And the boys were challenging each other, how far can you climb on the ladder? So each boy took his turn. This one went up to half, this one went up a little bit more than half, a little bit less than half. None of them had the guts to climb up to the top. After a while, they had to come down. Came the Rebbe Maharash turn. And he went up the ladder, he went all the way to the top. The only one. And came down. The Tzemach Tzedek, his father, observed what was happening. And he asked him later on, how come the other boys came down in the middle, and you went all the way to the top? So he said, it's simple, he said, because they, as they were climbing up, they would look back down. I didn't look back down. I only look upwards. And therefore, that's why I was able to go all the way to the top. Okay. So you would think that you have a trick. The trick is, don't look back. Don't look down. The question is, why is it that the Rebbe Maharash needs a person of the personality caliber of the character of Rebbe Maharash to do this feat, and the other boys couldn't? What's the difference? They didn't know of the trick, don't look down. It wasn't a trick. The answer is that generally speaking, the other boys felt that their secure place where they are is on the earth. This is where they're secure. Every step they take up, they're away from the secure place. Therefore, they have to constantly look back how far they are from their base. And the minute he got too high up away from the base, he didn't have the guts anymore. He didn't have the moral strength to continue. The Rebbe, he didn't have the earth as the base. Wherever he is, that's where the Rebbe is. And wherever the Rebbe is, he's not afraid. He doesn't have to look down. He's not, why should he look down on the earth? That's not the base. Wherever he is, that's where the Rebbe carries him. So therefore he was able to go without looking back. This is true. They're not Rebbes. But every Yid has a certain aspect of this quality. We look at ourselves, who am I? How am I going to do this? How am I going to accomplish this? If the Yidden coming out of the concentration camps would have been looking at themselves and saying, how am I ever going to accomplish this? Look who I am. They wouldn't have made it. But they didn't look at that. They look at where is the truth? Where is the Eibishter? Where is Hashem? Where is this the power of the Jew that's there all the time? And therefore they were able to go ahead and do it. They didn't have to look back and say, oh, who am I? It's not me, it's not my individuality that builds it, it's my being Jewish that builds it. And that's limitless. This is the principle for every Yid. And we're talking about Tshuva, we came about Tshuva at age 25. What am I ever going to accomplish? Don't look at your limits. Look at your infinite qualities, which unite you with every other Jew. Which says that you are a Jew in 100%, not 99%. You're 100%. Like every leaf represents the tree 100%. And since I'm 100% a Yid, I can do whatever I can do 100%. No limit. And you have to remember that every Yid that's sitting next to you is also 100%. He's also infinite. He's also representative of the same God. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. That's what Yankov's son said. We're all members of the same God. So if we don't like the way our neighbor eats, we don't like the way he screams, the way he talks, the way we have to. Yes, I'm not saying that we have to like every quality in every person, but we have to always remember that we are just objecting to a certain quality, not to him. And if we begin to look at each other from that perspective, we will see that we don't really resent the other person that much. Because we relate on a real basis. I remember as a bocher in yeshiva, I was still a boy when 12, 13, 14 years old, kids. In those years, we were all in dormitory. We didn't live at home. We were in dormitory. And kids fight. I remember one particular day, there was really a harsh fight among a couple of kids. I mean, they really beat each other up. This is during recess time. Then we came back, the time to sit down and learn. And two of these kids who were fighting were actually Chaverim. They learned together. But they were Chaverim, Chabrusas. They sat down. So one of the kids who was really beaten up says, I don't want to learn with you. The other one says, don't learn with me. Don't learn with me. In other words, he was taking it back. Just because we fought, just because I beat you up, you don't want to learn with me? How is it possible? What does that have to do with that? I go, don't want to learn with me? Well, it took only about a half a minute to wipe the whole thing away and say, this is what it means, a Yid. The real Yid surfaced, shone through, and nullified everything else. With this, we can prepare ourselves to Matan Torah. Okay, you're welcome.
Good.